What do you think happened?
I mean, the person who we saw in the video from the front doorbell camera um, may not be the mastermind of this whole thing, may not be what these profilers call the puppet master. That person may have just been sort of an underling. That person in the video could be dead.
Hey guys, it's Jackson Buhai here with TMZ. Now, we have officially reached the 3-month mark since Nancy Guthrie's initial abduction, and today I've brought on a guest that has gotten as much boots on the ground experience, arguably, as the investigators themselves. Now, he is a senior national correspondent for News Nation. He also runs the YouTube channel Entin Investigates, and I would argue he is one of the main reasons that the Nancy Guthrie investigation is still making the rounds in mainstream headlines. So Entin, thank you so much for joining me today.
Hey, Jackson. Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Of course. Now, starting off, I mean, you have had so much boots on the ground experience. You know, you've been all around Tucson. You've spoken to investigators that are actually involved with the case. You've spoken to people that knew Nancy Guthrie personally. You've spoken to a variety of experts. What's it been like covering a nationwide case such as this one?
Yeah, I mean, it's been kind of a wild 3 months. I got to Tucson the day after Nancy Guthrie disappeared, so February 2nd, and I stayed there for almost 2 full months, and just went to Nancy's house every day, went to the sheriff's office, just like, went to Mexico, just try to dig up anything that I could. And then I've been going back almost every week since then after I was there for the first 2 months. So it's kind of been a long haul, but I mean, you know how it is. It's like there's certain cases and stories you just can't shake. Like I still don't understand how an 84-year-old woman just disappears from her bed in the middle of the night. And so I've just tried to stay on it and keep working my sources and try to figure out, kind of what's going on.
You've been covering this case for the last 3 months, and you've interviewed so many people. I'm wondering, is there an interview that stands out the most to you? Is there a guest that told you something that made you stop in your tracks and go, whoa, we should be taking a closer look at this?
Yeah, I mean, and we have this special coming up on the CW. I interviewed a source close to the investigation who I've gotten to know, and we interviewed and we had to put in silhouette, so like in a shadow, so you can't tell who they are, and change their voice. Just because they could obviously get in trouble for speaking out to us. But that one really stands out just because the person explained issues with the investigation early on, how inexperienced the team was initially, and just some mistakes that were made within the first couple of days. The fact that they were working off this theory initially that Nancy had just walked away, which really makes no sense. I mean, first of all, she could walk very well because of her medical condition, and she didn't have Alzheimer's or anything like that. So that person explained to me that some time was wasted. So that's one that really stands out to me, just because to be able to talk to an insider like that was really interesting, especially considering how long I've been covering the case.
And so I don't think anybody's asked you this question yet, and I've always wanted to ask you this because I've been watching your content for a while. What do you think happened?
I wish I had a good answer to that. I mean, with some of the other big cases I've covered, like Brian Koberger and many others, you'll sort of have this theory in the back of your mind that you don't really report because you don't have evidence, but you talk to your family and friends about it. With this case, I really don't know. I mean, it really is such a mystery. For this special that I'm working on, I interviewed three of the top criminal profilers, including Dr. Ann Burgess, who the show Mindhunter is partially based on. And that opened my mind up to a lot of theories that I hadn't really thought about, like the fact that, the ransom just doesn't make a lot of sense. There was never any proof of life. There was never any real way for the family to communicate with the abductor. The fact that they, emailed TMZ, emailed you guys, emailed the media is really unusual, typically in a ransom situation. So I've been thinking a lot lately about whether the ransom, is sort of just cover for some other kind of motive behind the scenes.
Right. I mean, it seems like, at least judging by that Nest doorbell video, the person that conducted this crime was very calm. Seemed like they knew what they were doing. They knew their way around the house. What I'll also add is I know you haven't seen the ransom notes, but we have. And it seems like this person is highly sophisticated. They knew what they were doing. And just by the way that they speak or they write in this ransom note, you can tell that this person is intelligent. And it was very clearly premeditated. Do you think that there's a possibility that the person that did this was someone that knew her intimately?
Yeah, so it seems statistically the chances are it's someone who knew Nancy, and whether they knew her intimately, I don't know. I mean, but knew her in some way, whether it's someone who had worked in her house, someone she bumped into at the grocery store, someone who had some kind of interaction with Nancy in the past. I also wonder, how many other people could be involved. And this is something else that I talked to these profilers about. I mean, the person who we saw in the video from the front doorbell camera um, may not be the mastermind of this whole thing, may not be what these profilers call the puppet master. That person may have just been sort of an underling. I interviewed Dr. Gary Burkado, who's a criminal profiler, and he used the analogy. Yeah, he used the analogy of like a chef and a waiter. Like the person we saw in the video may just be the waiter, but there may be a chef behind the scenes who's sort of calling the shots and is maybe the one who wrote the letters to TMZ, is sort of the mastermind behind the whole thing.
And, since you have interviewed people that are involved with the case directly, how close do you think authorities are to making a breakthrough in this investigation?
I mean, unfortunately, based on the latest information I have, I don't think that they're terribly close. There's no suspect. They continue to work through leads and tips that have come in. I don't think it's a cold case because there's still a lot to be investigated and there's still a lot of tips that they haven't had a chance yet to go through. But I don't get the sense that they're especially close. I mean, I have hope that the DNA evidence will maybe pan out. I reported there was this hair that was found inside the house that's now being tested at the FBI lab in Quantico. I'm told it's a rootless hair. So like, when there's still like root attached to the hair, it's much easier to test and get DNA off the root. But when there's no root, like is the case I'm told with this hair, it's more complicated. It's kind of a newer science, and it takes more time. And there's less likely a chance that there is DNA on a rootless hair, although it's still possible. So I guess what I'm getting at is I'm hoping that eventually there may be some kind of DNA breakthrough. And we've seen it with other cases where a lot of time will go by and then they'll have a breakthrough with the DNA. And I think that's a possibility in this case. But I don't have any indication that they're getting really close right now.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that because I think that the DNA evidence is one of the most crucial pieces in furthering the case. I spoke to a genealogist, one of the biggest expert genealogists in her field, who said that, because of this strand of DNA that they have, we could be weeks away from solving the case, we could be years. But aside from that, do you think there is a specific piece of evidence or a clue that you have seen that the public should be taking a closer look at?
I think I just still go back to the doorbell video and pictures. I mean, when that came out, you can see the guy's eyes, and I say guy, I'm assuming it's a guy. I guess could technically be a woman, but you can see the mouth. I mean, there's someone out there who knows who that person is. I mean, there just has to be. What's interesting, and we get into this in this special on the CW that I'm working on, which airs Wednesday night at 9. With these profilers, one thing that they all seem to agree on, which is something I hadn't thought a ton about, is that that person in the video could be dead. I mean, if there is in fact truly a puppet master, a leader of this whole thing, and that was just an underling, could they have killed the person at the front door because they were afraid they were going to speak out, try to get the ransom? They were the one on video. The profilers call it elimination. Could he have been eliminated? And they seem to think that that's a real possibility, which is kind of an interesting thing to think about.
Something I want to ask you, considering that you've spoken to people that that know this case intimately. They don't want to go to CNN and they don't want to go to Fox to talk about this. They want to come directly to Brian Entin, and they trust you with their anonymity. Why do you think that is?
Look, a lot of the people who I have gotten to know, I've talked to since the beginning, and you kind of just build that trust with people where if they tell you not to say something, you don't. I run a lot of things by them. I'm very, very careful in my reporting. I try not to report any rumors. I try to be really, really careful and just report the facts. So, I think that trust you build up over time. And I always appreciate when people trust me because they take a big risk, like the person we have in our special who we put in silhouette and change their voice. I mean, they're trusting me to do that and to really protect their identity because they're going out on a limb to talk to me. And so, I try to do my best to do that and do the right thing.
Yeah, it seems like you really cultivated a real community around this case. Like any time I see you at her house, you're nearly always accompanied by people that are like-minded and that want to find her. Um, Regarding her house, you've also spoken to her neighbors. Is there anything that stands out to you from one of your interviews with the neighbors that the public should also be taking a closer look at?
Yeah, I mean, I think people forget about, like, everybody thinks about Nancy Guthrie as Savannah's mom, but she lived in that house since the 70s. A lot of the neighbors have lived there for decades and really knew Nancy. I mean, they've known her for years and years. A lot of them went to high school with Nancy's kids. So like it's very, very personal for them. There was a walking group in the neighborhood that the women were in with Nancy years ago. People have gone to church with Nancy. So to them, it's a different vibe. I mean, this is someone that they intimately knew, that they're really distraught about. And then this is also their neighborhood. Like they're genuinely scared with the fact that this is still unsolved and they don't know who's responsible. There's one neighbor I interviewed again last week, who, the FBI has been to these folks' house. Many of the neighbors been to their house 4 or 5 times, re-interviewing them, asking. This one neighbor, saw something suspicious around the date of January 11th, which is when we think the suspect was on camera for the first time. Saw someone walking by, strange. So they have little tidbits of information that they've been sharing with the FBI. I think there's some frustration though that they feel just that it's been 3 months, and that it's gotten so quiet. I mean, a lot of them liked having the reporters outside Nancy's house, believe it or not, because they felt like there was still attention on the case. They felt like there was progress being made, and now it's gotten really quiet in the neighborhood.
I'm glad you bring up the neighborhood. Talk to me about the terrain. She lives in a very secluded place. Even her neighbors are a hop, skip, and a jump away. And, it seems like the people that planned this crime, you look at the blood, it stops at the end of the walkway there. Seems like she's loaded into a car. But I think what the authorities, at least to me, seem to be struggling with at the beginning was identifying this car and getting CCTV footage of the car that she could have possibly been in. But I've spoken to a variety of investigators that say the route that these people took was pre-planned so that they would avoid any kind of detection in CCTV cameras. In that kind of terrain, you tell me, because you've been boots on the ground, do you think it would be easy to track this car using cameras? Are there a lot of cameras around the roads?
I think it would be difficult, because there's not a lot of cameras in the neighborhood. There are on some of the houses, but the problem is the houses are set pretty far back. They're really big lots. Some of the houses are on an acre of land, and there's like a ton of cactuses and brush in front of the house, and then the house is far back. So even if they have a camera, like at the front door or on the front of their house, it wouldn't necessarily see the street. It's also so dark. Like you don't really understand until you're there. There's people don't have there's no street lights, and there's like an ordinance because there's so many stargazers that you're not allowed to have bright outdoor lights. So at night it is literally pitch black in that neighborhood. And even though I was there for months, I still find myself having to use GPS to like get in and out of the neighborhood many times, especially at night, because it's just so twisty and windy. And I'd be like, oh, let me not use the GPS today. I think I can remember how to get to the main road, and I would like literally end up like lost in a different part of the neighborhood. So it's confusing, and it makes you think that this person probably did have a mapped way in and out and a plan of how they were going to get out, and avoid sort of the main roads where there are the traffic cameras.
You've spoken to a profiler that said that this person was local to Tucson. Do you subscribe to that belief as well?
I do. I think my sense is that the person is local. I mean, they did reach out to you guys at TMZ, but they also reached out to the local TV stations. Also, the fact that we believe the person was on camera in the neighborhood at the house 2 weeks before makes me think that it's a local person. So yeah, my sense has been since the beginning that it's someone close by, that it's someone either even maybe even in that neighborhood or in the Tucson area.
My last question for you here, Brian, and thank you again for your time today. But how do you hope to see in the next few weeks this case be resolved moving forward?
Look, I mean, I think two things are going to either happen, or three things could either happen. One, we could it could stay the way it is, which will be frustrating, and they'll be working behind the scenes, but there'll be no suspects and no real progress. Two, I think that the DNA evidence will come through, whether it be the hair or some kind of genetic genealogy testing that they're doing, and there'll be some kind of DNA breakthrough. Or three, and I kind of just, my gut says this might be the most likely, that there's going to be some kind of lucky break, like some lucky tip that comes in, and it's just some small detail that it's exactly what the investigators needed, or even someone in jail, some inmate's going to say something that heard something, and they tell somebody else, and it gets back to the investigators, and it's just going to be one little detail that I hope is enough, just one little lucky break, to bust this whole thing open.
Brian, you've been absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much for joining me today. Guys, make sure you go and watch the Nancy Guthrie mystery. It's Brian Entin's special. It will be airing May 6th, 9 p.m. Eastern Time on the CW network. Brian, thanks again.
Thank you.